United we play, united we win.
Deep right field, another absolute bomb over the flag court.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are still up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. That was our first goof of the night.
You just took my line. That's crazy. That's
You were going to
crazy.
use it?
I literally just said
Well,
that.
I got to talk first.
That's nuts.
That's a goof on you.
Everybody should know that I said that during the countdown. He said nothing and then came out with my line.
That's a goof on
you.
you.
You are a thief.
We were at goof number 2.
Oh,
Well,
my
we promised
goodness.
laughs and goofs, so now we're getting into a totally different definition of goofs.
You've been goofed. I'm Brennan Mortensen.
I have.
He is Matt Bonaparte. She is Annie Klaff. The Orioles selected Enrique Bradfield Jr.
That's
the
true.
17th overall pick. We broke it down for about 4 minutes until we had technical difficulties. Look, at least those difficulties did not come during our live show, which hopefully you tuned into as we broke down the Orioles selection. But we'll do a little recap of what we were talking about before. The Orioles select Enrique Bradfield Jr., the outfielder from Vanderbilt, probably the fastest player in this draft class, had an 80 grade run tool, according to MLB Pipeline. Speedy center fielder, not going to hit for a ton of power. Has, I think, 15 home runs in his college career, so he may not be a 30 home run guy at the big league level, but he's going to give you great speed on the base pass, going to give you great speed and defense in center field. Really high floor player here for the Orioles, a proven SEC talent with some high upside as well, because if you can get the most out of his bat, which is still very good. The OPS sat around 850 in his junior year. Even that took a little dip from an OPS over 900 in his sophomore season. So if you can get the most out of his bat, maybe they see some more there as well, then this is a really high upside player because the other tools are just that good.
Well, he also was projected way higher than 17 at the beginning of the season, and then he had maybe not his best season ever at Vanderbilt, and his stock went down a little bit. So I think the Orioles saw an opportunity, and they took it to take Enrique Bradfield a little bit later than I think anybody a year ago would have expected him to go. So look at it that way, a huge steal potentially for the Orioles in Enrique Bradfield Jr. at number 17 in this draft.
It's interesting when you look at that difference between how he was as a junior at Vanderbilt versus a freshman, because he won SEC Freshman of the Year in 2021, which is a huge accolade, especially in a strong conference like that.
Yeah, and with Bradfield, he's the type of player, too, that I think could be a pretty quick riser throughout the system. Because as we've mentioned, the tools already kind of jump off the page. The biggest thing for Bradfield is going to be how the bat translates at the next level. We know that Single-A Aberdeen, where he will be, maybe towards the very end of this season, we saw Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian, Max Wagner, the college guys that the Orioles selected last year, start in the FCL, get, probably a week or two worth of games there. Then they head up to Aberdeen. Aberdeen is a really hard place to hit. It is very much a pitcher's park. I think that's going to be the biggest test for Bradfield right out of the gate, because we know the speed is going to translate. We know the fielding is going to translate. How does the bat translate? What changes are the Orioles going to make, if many, to the bat to get as much power as they possibly can? He's probably a gap-to-gap power guy. He's going to be a doubles power guy, but maybe there's something in the tank there. I mean, we were talking with Mike Elias at the end of the draft show, who seemed to believe that they could get some more power out of Bradfield than we saw at Vanderbilt. So maybe more upside with the bat than we are initially thinking here just reading scouting reports.
Yeah, well, the question here is, did they draft him because they think that they can do something with his swing that maybe he's not doing right now? Can they go in there and try and fix something, an issue they see, and turn him from a good hitter into a great one, turning him into a solid major league center fielder that can start every day? Because like you said, Brendan, the big question mark right now is the swing. It is the bat, because we know he's got the fielding aspect. We know he's got that great run. We got to see if he can hit.
I think that whatever the tweaks are that the Orioles have in their vision right now is just, no matter what it is, I think that Elias and Selick put a lot of emphasis and confidence in their player development process and program, so that regardless of the player, college or high school, I think that they believe that they can make those tweaks and build them up into a strong Orioles player.
Yeah, and that's what we've heard so much leading up to this draft is it's not just traditional scouting. It's not just the analytics led by Sig Mejdal, which has been such a big part of the draft process. The player development staff is also very heavily involved with the draft process, which makes sense when you think about it. Not only are you trying to draft the best player available, but part of that calculation needs to be, okay, we know the strength of our player development staff. What player are we going to be able to draft where our player development staff is going to maximize their potential more so than maybe somebody else in this draft they believed could have had a higher upside if they were in a different player development staff. But they know the strengths of this team. They know how they've been able to develop players down in the minor league system. And it's crucial that those three things, the traditional scouting, the analytics, and the player development staff, are working in tandem to be able to select the best player, not only based on their talent and the kind of player that they could be in the future, but the kind of player that they would be able to develop in the minor league system.
It was an interesting selection because Hurston Waldrop was on the board. And leading up to the draft, there were so many questions about pitching. There were so many questions that we were asking about what goes in to this selection. Is it a group decision? Do you guys just try? And Sig Mejdal told us they try to make as many people not unhappy as possible, which was...
You're never going to have a consensus. Yeah. You're just trying not to make people angry.
Exactly. So it was an interesting spot because we kind of got a good look into where they put Hurston Waldrop on that board. Clearly, it was under Enrique Bradfield Jr., but does that mean they were really high in Enrique and probably higher than a lot of other teams? Because we heard that about certain players, not specific ones, but that there were players that they're higher on than others from Brad Selick. Or does it just mean that Hurston Waldrop wasn't as high on their board as everybody else's?
It's also really interesting because in past drafts, the front office has said, like, oh, we basically just picked whatever the best player was at that time.
Best player available.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that was easier because they had the luxury of being the top 5 picks in the last 4 years. Right. But now, at pick 17, there were still plenty of really strong players, regardless of position, regardless of grades, whatnot. So it is really interesting that they went with Enrique Bradfield Jr. over a pitcher that was still a really strong option because there were a few still left.
Yeah, let's talk about the rest of the draft leading up to the Orioles pick at number 17. As an Orioles fan, this draft in terms of what you were looking for, what impacted Baltimore, probably started right around pick 10. I think the top 9 picks were pretty chalky, finishing up with Chase Dollander going to the Colorado Rockies. Probably Blake Mitchell going to the Royals at 8 was the only player that the Orioles could have been looking at number 17. That was somebody that we had talked about leading up to the draft. And then at number 10, Noble Meyer goes off the board to the Marlins. Noble Meyer is somebody, in my conversation with Joe Doyle, draft analyst for Future Stars series, he said if Noble Meyer is on the board for the Orioles at number 17, he's got a ton of upside. The Orioles could be looking at him as a potential selection. He goes off the board there. And then we really start to see the players that we were heavily considering as possibilities for the O's at 17. Nolan Schanuel goes at number 11 to the Angels. Tommy Troy at number 12, the shortstop from Stanford. Matt Shaw, the Maryland product, goes to the Cubs at 13. Kyle Teal slipped a little bit. He goes to the Red Sox at number 14. Jacob Gonzalez slipped a little bit as well. He goes to the White Sox at number 15. And then right before the Orioles pick was the guy that we have talked about the most on this show, Matt. Bryce Eldridge goes
That's
number
my guy,
16 to the San Francisco Giants. I didn't see the draft board. I don't know if the Orioles had Enrique
I
Bradfield
would love
Jr.
to know.
ranked higher than Bryce Eldridge. I think it's entirely possible because the Orioles like their college bats, as we know. Bradfield is an established college bat from an SEC powerhouse school in Vanderbilt. It is entirely possible that if Bryce Eldridge and Enrique Bradfield Jr. are on the board at number 17, they still take Bradfield Jr. But Bryce Eldridge was a distinct possibility for the O's, and he goes the pick before.
They're probably glad that they didn't have to make that decision and that it was made for them, but I would have been really surprised if that were the case. I mean, maybe it's just because I was so high on Bryce Eldridge, but...
We were really high on Bryce Eldridge,
I will say. Because he's so cool, man. He's a two-way player.
Bryce Eldridge goes at 16, and we were talking about it on our MASN All Access live draft show, and you were saying he has prodigious power, he has the arm of a god. I was like, wow, how did this guy not go number one the way you're talking about him?
He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's so cool. And I wanted him to be an Oriole really, really badly. And maybe he wouldn't have been anyway. Maybe they did have Bradfield over him. Like, again, I'm almost talking myself into it that they had Bradfield, like, ranked 10th or something, and every other team had him, like, 20th.
Well, a lot of mock drafts had Enrique Bradfield Jr. going top 10.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Orioles reached on... This is a SEC well-established outfielder who has been excellent for 3 college seasons. That's really hard to find. And that's a really talented player to get at number 17.
And that also goes to show that because he was predicted to go away or to be picked in the top 10, that there was really a heavy importance on his speed and defense versus maybe a lack in hitting skills. Just really goes to show that his speed was way more of a priority.
Yeah, and to that point, Bryce Eldridge, if you're going to look at the things that Bradfield gives you, it's, a lot of speed and excellent defense at a position of immense value in center field. There is no question that Enrique Bradfield Jr. is going to be a center fielder at the next level. He has the speed, he has the arm talent, everything. Bryce Eldridge, as exciting of a player as he is, as a potential two-way player, he played first base in high school. And part of that was probably because the team was trying to preserve his arm. He was also a pitcher. They didn't want him in the outfield making long throws. You didn't really know if he was going to be a corner outfielder, but even if he is a corner outfielder, that's not a position of a lot of value. Enrique Bradfield Jr. is up the middle. He's going to play center, and he's going to play it well. That alone gives you more value than Bryce Eldridge would have given you if he was a first base corner outfield hybrid.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one that I probably didn't see in my love for Bryce Eldridge.
You were blinded by your admiration.
I really was. I wanted to see that guy as an Oriole, but you're definitely right about that. I mean, with the position that the Orioles are in right now, with so much talent in that farm system, it only makes sense to pick the guys who are in the positions of immense need, or not need, but power. Those are the positions that are incredibly important for every single team. And if you're going to be a successful club, you're going to have a few positions down, and one of those is certainly center field.
And if they went for immense need, many would argue that they probably should have picked a pitcher.
Sure. Let's talk about that.
All right.
Many Orioles fans were hoping that the number 17 pick here would be a pitcher. And a lot of the names that we threw out were off the board. Chase Dollander went top 10. Noble Meyer went top 10. Obviously, Paul Skeens was not going to be there. He was not going to be a possibility. But the one name that was consistently brought up in this pre-draft process as a possibility for the Orioles at number 17 was Hurston Waldrop. Hurston Waldrop was on the board, and the Orioles elect to go with Bradfield instead of Waldrop. And to me, that just indicates that the Orioles know that they can develop the heck out of a position player. They have proved it time and time again with selections in the first, second, third, fourth round. I mean, Joey Ortiz is a top 65 prospect in baseball right now, and he was a fourth-round pick in 2019. The Orioles can develop position players, and you know that Enrique Bradfield, you don't know it, but Enrique Bradfield Jr. is probably going to be a top 100 prospect at some point because he is in this player development system, And the Orioles just know how to develop hitters. We haven't seen it as much with pitchers because they haven't drafted a pitcher in the first 4 rounds, I don't believe, outside of Nolan McLean that they drafted last year and weren't able to sign. I think the highest pitcher that they've drafted, or at least one of the highest pitchers, Trace Bright, was a 5th-round pick last year. They selected Carlos Tavera. I think he was a 5th-round pick. Not many pitchers have been drafted that high. The Orioles know they can develop position players, and yeah, maybe the system on the surface needed some pitchers, but you have some high upside guys, and maybe the talent with Waldrop just wasn't exactly what they were looking for.
It's as if they're kind of saying, like, we know what's been good for us in the past, so why change what's good? And they've even admitted it. Brad Ciolek said in an interview in a pregame recently, like, oh, we know that college hitters are our bread and butter. So it's like they've admitted it. They know it's working well. Just weren't really going to give away anything ahead of the draft if they were going to pick a pitcher or not, which really wasn't on the top of their minds.
Sure. At the same time, Elias did say they know that they have to have a good starting rotation to win a World Series.
Right.
And obviously he knows that, and obviously everybody knows that, but they don't have one. They don't have a great starting rotation right now. They have a solid one, but they need to build towards the future. I don't know necessarily how they're going to do it, but they probably have a plan in place that we don't see. Maybe it's just not through the draft.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that it's at the trade deadline.
Yes.
We saw last year at the deadline, the Orioles moved Trey Mancini. They moved Jorge Lopez. In those returns, they got all-star Yennier Cano, who was a pitcher not in their system, turns out to be a fantastic bullpen arm. And they also got Cade Povich and Chase McDermott, who have shown a ton of flashes so far in Double-A Bowie. And even if the Orioles didn't draft those guys, maybe they feel more comfortable being able to get some guys at a little bit of a higher level, develop them in Double-A, Triple-A, get them up to the majors. Look no further than Kyle Bradish, who is one of the Orioles' better starting pitching. I mean, you can't really call him a prospect at this point, but he's still a young starting pitcher here for the Orioles. He was acquired via trade from the Los Angeles Angels. The Orioles didn't draft Bradish, but they felt confident enough with dealing from inside the organization to go out and get a pitcher. And maybe that's just the Orioles' strategy here. I mean, their strategy right now has been working.
Absolutely.
They've had the number one farm system consistently. As you mentioned, Danny, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, they can draft position players. They can develop position players. Maybe they just don't feel as confident developing a pitcher that they draft in the first round. There's a ton of risk with pitchers that are drafted in the first round. I mean, look at last year. And the year, Jack Leiter was the number 2 overall pick and has really, really struggled in Texas. Look at past drafts with guys like Asa Lacy, Emerson Hancock. Pitchers in the first round, Kumar Rocker. I mean, there are so many examples of pitchers that are drafted in the first round that struggle out of the gate. There's not an example of an Orioles position player over the last 4 years that they have drafted that has struggled in any way, shape, or form.
And to be clear, I think that they should absolutely be trusted in whatever they do in the draft because of that success. I mean, they haven't had a misstep. Seriously, they haven't. I mean, it is so easy to step on a mine in the MLB draft, and they have not done it one time. Mike Elias and co. have been so good at what they do come draft time that they have earned the respect and the trust of every Orioles fan just because of pure success. So I'm not saying that they made a mistake not taking a pitcher, but I am saying I'd like to see the plan.
I will say that another player I was kind of a little bit hoping that the Orioles would pick was Arjun Nimala.
Yeah, Nimala, a ton of upside. We have talked about him on this show as well. One of the youngest players in this draft is just 17 years old at the time he's drafted by a division rival in the Toronto Blue Jays with the 20th overall pick. Nimala was a cricket player for a while, didn't really start focusing a cricketer. Didn't really start focusing on baseball until his freshman year of high school. Didn't play in a ton of prep circuits because of that reason. And I think that probably gave scouts a little bit of hesitation in terms of, being able to get all of the information needed on Nimala to make that draft pick. But he had a ton of upside. It was just whether or not everything was polished enough to be able to go into professional baseball smoothly.
Yeah, and likely difficult to get enough on that guy. Like you said, wasn't in those prep circuits. Hard to get enough information on that guy to leapfrog people like Enrique Bradfield, who's had 3 years in an SEC powerhouse conference. So yeah, it's very difficult to overcome those kinds of odds if you're Arjun Nimmala. But hey, still a first-round pick for him, so good for him. But like you said, Annie, I would have liked to see him too. I mean, an interesting player for sure, but also there's plenty of infield in that farm system. So I don't mind seeing an outfielder.
Well, there's plenty of infield. There's plenty of outfield. There's plenty of
everything.
Players,
and we've said that so many times.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see. I mean, we could be having a completely different conversation about the Orioles farm system in 2 weeks at the trade deadline.
That's crazy that it's only 2 weeks away.
2 weeks,
it's
3
sneaking
weeks.
Up on
I don't
me,
know
man.
how long it is. I haven't slept in a week trying to do draft prep, but if the Orioles go to the trade deadline, we don't know what kind of moves they can make, but as of right now, the Orioles are firmly playoff contenders. So if we get to the trade deadline and they end up trading from this, embarrassment of riches of position player prospects that they have, if they end up trading some of those guys and get a front-of-the-line rotation starting pitcher, we're going to be talking about, it's a good thing that they drafted another position player in the first round. We'll see what they end up doing in the second round. But if they end up trading these position player prospects that they have for well-established major league arms,
then it's all worth
better
it.
than
then
drafting
it's all
a pitcher.
worth it. Absolutely.
Right.
I totally agree with you 100%. But it's about going out and doing that, and I'm so curious to see what ends up happening at the trade deadline. So we'll see. That obviously is on every fan's mind is, okay, who are you going to flip for a Dylan Cease or a Lucas Giolito or whoever's on the market? But, it's up to Mike Elias and those same guys to figure it out.
Well, in terms of the top 30 prospects for the Orioles, I'm guessing that Bradfield might come in around 10th, which is kind of hilarious.
Nuts. That's
because
absurd.
The Orioles farm system and top prospects are so good that I'm looking at the Orioles top 30 list right now. You've got Jackson Holliday, Colton Cowser, Jordan Westberg, Heston Kjerstad, Joey Ortiz, Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo, all as top 100 prospects. Being that Bradfield is the number 17 pick, usually we see about, 7, 8 guys from a draft class enter the top 100.
Something like that.
So Samuel Basayo might be bumped out, but we know that even if he is bumped out, he's right there in the top 100. DL Hall, not currently in the top 100. We know, he's been struggling with injuries. He's had the deloading phase. I can't imagine that Bradfield is over DL Hall, which would leave him at 10th, just above Dylan Beavers. And I can't believe that the 17th overall pick, who was a 3-year excellent starter at one of the best college baseball programs in the country, would be the Orioles' 10th ranked prospect. That's absurd.
Only team where that happens, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It just, that would not happen anywhere else.
No.
This farm system is just elite. It's unbeatable. It's been number one since midway through 2021. Mike Elias and the rest of the front office have built something so special in this farm system that this is just evidence and proof in the pudding that Enrique Bradfield is that this farm system is unreal.
Yeah,
and it's just gone to show just the previous years in the Elias era, everything, how much of an importance his rebuilding strategies and rebuilding tactics for the Orioles have gone and how they've succeeded into what they are now, especially on the farm.
Yeah, and this perfectly fits the blueprint. You look at the Orioles' first-round picks from now back to 2019, you have Adley Rutschman, college switch hitter. Heston Kjerstad, college left-handed hitter in 2020. In 2021, Colton Cowser, college left hitter. In 2022, prep left-handed hitter, Jackson Holliday. And now in 2023, college left-handed hitter, Enrique Bradfield Jr.
I bet you they'd tell you that's all happenstance.
It's not. We're catching on to you. It is not happenstance. That is a formula if I have ever seen one.
I mean, yeah.
Go get good lefty bats.
Yes. I mean, they don't want to have to hit out to that left field wall, I'll tell you that much.
No.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if they switch that up in the next coming years because of maybe...
You think they're going to move it back in?
No, I don't know. But, like, in terms of...
They're going to move it way closer than it ever was before.
They're going to move it 20 feet the other way.
The other way.
But in terms of, like, predictability and everything in terms of a draft.
Because the Orioles, I mean, as much as we talked about, will they select a pitcher? Could they go with a prep guy? This. Yeah, of course they went with a left-handed hitting college outfielder who was excellent at an SEC school for 3 years.
It's your catchphrase, excellent. You say that 45, like every 45 words is excellent out of your mouth.
From you. Yeah, like as much as we wanted to talk about the Orioles draft strategy and could they change things up, no, they went right back to the blueprint and they took a well-established college bat.
Because why wouldn't they?
Because it's worked every single time.
Why wouldn't they go? Why wouldn't they stick with the blueprint?
Yeah.
That's what's built this farm system that I'm raving about.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with it.
And
Just okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, just okay with the number one farm system in
It works
baseball.
for me.
Later on in the draft, there were a few other possibilities that we were looking at and had seen in mock drafts, heard as distinct possibilities. Chase Davis goes 21st overall to the St. Louis Cardinals. Colt Emerson goes 22nd to the Mariners. Outside of those guys, I mean, Waldrop goes 24th to the Braves, as we mentioned. Dylan Head, 25th. Aiden Miller, 27th.
Can't believe you just skipped over Ralphie Velasquez like that.
Ralphie Velasquez was not one of the guys that we had talked about of the Orioles draft.
He's got an awesome name, though.
How about Colin Houck? 12th ranked prospect according to MLB Pipeline, goes all the way down to 32 to the New York Mets. A couple of prep arms in Charlie Soto, Thomas White. But I think all of the guys that we had talked about pretty much went in the 13 to 22 range.
Pretty chalky draft.
But
Yeah.
it worked out well for the Orioles.
It did.
Enrique Bradfield Jr., who maybe slipped down the board a little bit to the O's at number 17.
The one not incredibly chalky pick.
Yeah.
So leave it to the O's.
But it's still kind of chalk for the O's. Left-handed hitting college bat.
Happenstance.
It happens. And it's, again, the Orioles are just so good at developing position players that it's hard to even, not that we're sitting here questioning the pick in any way, but it's hard to sit here and even question what Bradfield might be at the next level once he gets to Aberdeen, once he moves up to Bowie in terms of the bat, because we just haven't seen anything from this front office, from this player development staff that would tell you it's going to be anything other than excellent.
Yeah, I mean, there it is. I mean,
I had to go back to
it is just, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it. And especially upcoming at the deadline. What are they going to do with this farm system? They have so much ammunition, more than any other team in the majors. It's going to be, I'm excited to see what happens. As I said before the draft, and I believe on our first draft preview episode, Mike was in his bag in this one. All right, he had the 17th pick. He didn't have the first, the second, or the fifth. He had an opportunity to show it, and he did. I mean, he got one of the better players in the draft probably at 17. So I'm excited to see how Enrique turns out. I'm excited to see what they end up doing at the deadline.
I'm curious to see what Enrique's turnaround and progression time is on the farm, because he's got big shoes to fill coming after Jackson Holliday, who's, of course, now the number one prospect.
Yeah, Jackson Holliday, a quick mover throughout the Orioles minor league system, just at 19 years old. He has been unbelievable. We're not expecting Jackson Holliday type of numbers out of Enrique Bradfield Jr., but who knows? Again, so the Orioles
he heard
at
that.
number
He's
17.
putting that on his wall as some bulletin board material.
I hope so. I hope he does. The Orioles select Enrique Bradfield Jr. at number 17 overall. We've been breaking it down here on MASN All Access. If you've hung out with us today, thanks so much for hanging out.
Thanks.
We had a fun time on our live draft show. Had a fun time hanging out here on the Bird's Nest. We hope we provided enough laughs and goofs, because we did promise those laughs and goofs.
We did. I told you they'd be here, and I hope they were.
Well, the Orioles have some more selections tonight. We'll see who they select with their second-round pick. But in Enrique Bradfield Jr., they get an excellent prospect, one of the better ones in this draft, well-established SEC guy. We're excited to see where Enrique goes in this Orioles minor league system. But that'll just about do it here for us on the Bird's Nests. We need to get some sleep. We've been here all day.
That's a fact.
That is a fact.
That is true.
For Annie Klaff and Matt Bonaparte, I am Brendan Mortensen. We're not going to be back this week. We're taking an all-star break. You guys take an all-star break too. We'll be back after that. We look forward to seeing you then. We'll catch you next time.